Trayvon Martin was a 17-year-old African-American from Miami Gardens, Florida. He was the second son of divorced parents, a truck driver father, and a head of a halfway house mother. He also had an older brother who worked for a Florida congresswoman. At the age of 9, Trayvon saved his father's life by dragging him out of a burning apartment. Around the time of the shooting, Martin attended high school in the day and aviation school in the afternoon. He was a standout on the football team and volunteered at a local park in his free time. His girlfriend was quoted saying, "He was loving and caring, not the thug the media made him into." At a young age, Trayvon's father wouldn't allow him to play football if he didn't do well on schoolwork, teaching him discipline at such a young age. Trayvon's math teacher called him a bright student who he never saw show any sign of disrespect. Trayvon set a large goal to attend nearby University of Miami, a large football school, but put those dreams behind him for his love of aviation and academics. As a physical force on the football field, his friends described him as a walk away from a confrontation kind of guy. Trayvon, like Tom Robinson, had a prior criminal record, which in both cases were judged and exploited in the trial.
On the night of February 26, 2012, in Sanford, Florida, Trayvon Martin was shot dead by a neighborhood watch member, George Zimmerman. Zimmerman reported a suspicious figure walking the streets. He was instructed not to advance the figure. He then disregarded his instructions, and moments later, neighbors reported hearing gunfire. Zimmerman says he shot Trayvon Martin, but claimed it was in self-defense. In a police report written by Officer Timothy Smith, Smith had said Zimmerman was bleeding from the nose and the back of the head. Weeks later, on March 12th, Sanford Police Chief Bill Lee says that Zimmerman was not charged because there was no evidence to disprove his story of events. The next day, the Sanford Police Department's homicide detective, Christopher Serino, recommends Zimmerman get charged with manslaughter. His reasoning was Zimmerman failed to identify himself as a concerned citizen or neighborhood watch member on multiple occasions the night of the shooting. Serino also reported he thought Zimmerman's injuries were marginally consistent with a life-threatening episode, as described by him, during which neither a deadly weapon nor deadly force were deployed by Trayvon Martin. This shooting connects with the deceptive appearance theme. In relation to To Kill a Mockingbird, these appearances result in a trial where the black man is in defense. Tom Robinson and Trayvon Martin's trials were both ignited by the belief of something false. Tom Robinson, a black man, was convicted because the black man stereotype was that they should not be trusted around white women. Trayvon Martin was shot dead because he was a black teen walking the streets at night whilst wearing a hoodie.
In 2005, Florida passed the first Stand Your Ground law, allowing people, if they felt threatened or if they had reason to believe they were preventing death, to stand their ground and not retreat. On February the 26th, 2012, George Zimmerman shot 17-year-old Trayvon Martin, claiming Trayvon looked suspicious and new to the neighborhood. George was then charged with second-degree murder on April 11, 2012. Contrary to the Tom Robinson trial and To Kill a Mockingbird, written by Harper Lee, the George Zimmerman trial consisted of 6 female jurors, 5 Caucasian females, and 1 of a different ethnicity. Mark O'Mara, George's defense attorney, thought about asking Judge Deborah Nilsson for an immunity hearing, since by law, Zimmerman should have had immunity considering he used his gun as self-defense. However, if the defense lost the hearing, the prosecution would have had access to their side of the case before the trial. For the duration of the trial, Judge Nilsson had 75 witnesses interviewed by investigators and reviewed multiple times. The case was discussed nationally. People all over the USA argued about the trial and how the result of the outcome could determine the change in the Stand Your Ground law. For 16 hours, the jury was split, half wanting to find George Zimmerman guilty for manslaughter and half wanting him to go innocent because of the Stand Your Ground law. Ultimately, the verdict came down to, was Trayvon Martin really a threat to George Zimmerman? And did George really need to use his gun as self-defense? According to Jonathan Good, an eyewitness said while he was being interviewed multiple times that he saw a black guy over top of a man in a red or white shirt, although George wore orange that night. Jonathan Good then stated he ran to the phone and called 911, where he then heard a single gunshot. After hearing both testimonies, the evidence implied that Trayvon Martin was on top of George Zimmerman, beating him. Therefore, George had no choice but to use his gun as self-protection. And finally, the jury came to an agreement, and their verdict was not guilty.
The deaths of Tom Robinson and Trayvon Martin were both a miscarriage of justice in a corrupt society. Both cases resolved in the shooting of an innocent African-American male being accused of wrongful accusations because he was perceived as different. Before Trayvon was shot by George Zimmerman, he was in the middle of his 10-day suspension that he received from his local high school for having marijuana residue in his bag. Before Tom was accused of raping Mayella, he was sentenced to 10 days in jail for getting into a bar fight, which makes both these men, not first-time offenders, of being caught on the wrong side of the law. Although during the shooting, Trayvon was accused of having a gun in his pocket, it was only a bag of Skittles he bought from a corner store 9 minutes before Zimmerman started to trail him, whereas Tom was accused of a violent crime he did not commit. Both cases were a white man or a white woman's word to a black man's word. Bob and Mayella were worried about Tom because they thought he was different. Zimmerman followed and later shot Trayvon because Zimmerman thought he had a deceptive appearance and was just walking around the Twin Lakes retreat looking at houses, but in fact he was only walking home from the 7-Eleven he bought his final snack and drink at. Trayvon Martin was a mockingbird shot unjustly and unlawfully walking back to his mother's house when he was caught at the wrong place at the wrong time. As Trayvon walked through Twin Lakes, he was at a disadvantage because he was weaponless. A weapon can be used as a source of power. Guns have always been controversial. We like the way Miss Monty put it in To Kill a Mockingbird.
Marksmanship's a gift of God, a talent. Oh, you have to practice to make it perfect. But shooting's different from playing the piano. I think maybe he put his gun down when he realized that God had given him an unfair advantage over the most things. I guess he decided he wouldn't shoot till he had to.